Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is Technique Tuesday. So let's answer this question of, is it stretchy immediately? It's typically the first or one of the first questions I get in the comments anytime I upload a video on a bind off or cast on technique. If you want to jump right to the video demonstration, you can use the chapter links down in the video timeline to get you there. I have two swatches here. One of them has an edge that is not as wide as the swatch itself. You can see it kind of ends up curving inward because the bind off is too short, and it has a little bit of give, but very little compared to what the actual fabric has. This is one where I use this technique I'm going to demonstrate today, which is called the suspended bind off. And yes, the fabric stretches and the edge stretches more than this one. When a standard bind off chain is executed correctly, it is sufficiently stretchy for most projects. So this was not executed correctly. It was done too tightly. And so with the help of the suspended bind off, which prevents the knitter from binding off too tightly, you can get something that has quite a bit more give in it. It's not going to be stretchy enough for all projects. If you are knitting toe-up socks, you are going to need a bind off that will stretch as much as the fabric itself can stretch, because that bind off edge is around the largest circumference of the leg. And if you need something that stretches this much, this bind off is not going to do that. But it will be stretchy enough for things like hats, mittens, blankets, scarves, sweater cuffs, all that kind of thing. It is sufficiently stretchy for those particular applications. So let's get to the demonstration. This bind off starts out like a regular chain bind off starts out, where you're going to work the first two stitches. So I'm working in garter stitch, so I'm going to be knitting these two stitches. So don't worry about the fact that I'm holding the yarn in my left hand. If you hold the yarn in your right hand when you knit, just knit it with your right hand. These two stitches are knit stitches. Now, we're going to grab this stitch that is furthest from the tip, just like we would for a regular bind off. So we're passing it over the tip of the right hand needle, but we're not letting it drop off. We're going to keep it on the left hand needle right now. And now we're going to knit the next stitch. So we'll go through it and we just knit it like we normally would. And again, if you hold the yarn in your right hand, then you knit with the yarn in your right hand. You're just knitting that stitch. So now we can let both of those stitches off the needle. And again, we lift this over and we keep it on the left-hand needle. We are suspending the bind off. That's where it gets its name. So we are preventing this stitch right here from getting too tight in the bind off chain while we work the next one. Now it comes off the needle. So what the suspension is doing is preventing you from pulling this over and then tightening this stitch up, which you're not only going to tighten this on here, you're going to tighten that chain. You're just going to keep tightening. If you're pulling on that, that's what gives you that rigid bind off. But if you wait, if you pull this over and you hold it on here, that's going to prevent you from getting that rigid bind off. And then you can knit that next stitch like that. And then you pull this over and you knit the next stitch and let them both off the needle. So let's see what it looks like for purling. If you're going to purl a stitch, that yarn has to be in front. So again, you're going to lift this over and you've got to swing this tip around to the back. So you're going to go in here to purl this stitch. Again, whether you hold the yarn in your right hand or your left hand. And now you can let both stitches off the needle. So again, the yarn has to be in front. You're going to pass that over. Swing your tip around. I'm holding this on here so that it doesn't slide off while I do that maneuver. Come in to purl that stitch. And then let them both off the needle And now you've got these 2 stitches on here. So it's essentially the same. You're suspending that stitch while you work the next stitch on the needle. So here we've got a knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. So we're always working the stitches in pattern. So whatever they would be worked for a regular row, we're going to work them on the bind off row. So like always, we have to work the first 2 stitches before we can bind anything off. So these are both knit stitches. Now I need to look at the next stitch. Before I suspend this, I need to look at what the next stitch is, and the next stitch is going to be a purl. So I'm going to bring my yarn in front now in order to suspend this stitch, and then now I can purl it. So I bring the needle behind in order to purl it, and then I let them both off the needle. So once again, the yarn needs to stay in front because the next stitch is also a purl. So I'm going to suspend that one, bring my needle behind in order to purl. I can do that and let them both off the needle. And I naturally moved my yarn to the back when I let that off the needle, but if you didn't have the yarn in back, you need to move it in back because this next stitch is a knit stitch. So you need to suspend a stitch, knit the next one, and then let them both off. The next one is also a knit, so I can suspend this one, knit it, let them both off, and the next stitch is a purl, so I need to move this forward before I suspend that stitch. And then I can bring my needle to the back in order to purl it. So you always need to look at what the next stitch is when you're working something in pattern like this, where you're going to need to move your yarn back and forth. Before you suspend your stitch, check what the next stitch is going to be. With knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, we are going to be moving the yarn every single time because the yarn, the stitch is changing every single time. So we're going to work the first 2 stitches as they present, the way that they look. So we've got a knit stitch, and then we have a purl stitch. And then before we suspend it, we need to look at what the next stitch is, and that's a knit. So I move the yarn to the back, I suspend that stitch, I work my knit stitch, let them both off. Next stitch is going to be a purl, so I need to move my yarn to the front before I suspend, and then I can swing my needle around to the back to work the purl stitch. Then when you get to the last 2 stitches, you're going to go ahead and just pass that over. You're going to cut or break your yarn, and then just enlarge that stitch until the tail pulls out through. And then you have a bind off chain that's very stretchy for your ribbing. If you need a bind off that can stretch as much as the fabric, I'll put links to several options down in the video description. For other approaches to preventing a rigid bind off, try these tips over here. If you have trouble with your cast on edges being too tight, you might like the tips in this video over here. If you'd like to support my channel, you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi or click on the thanks button down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.